When you hear the phrase, it had nothing to offer, that is not the kind of line you ever want associated with a conversation between a company and the workers it just laid off. Yet, that is exactly what happened after the first talks between Ubisoft and the union representing employees from its recently closed Halifax studio. It immediately set the tone for how tense, frustrating, and disappointing the situation had become because this isn't just about a building shutting down or a project being canceled. This is about real people whose careers, stabilities, and futures were suddenly thrown into uncertainty. And the very first opportunity for Ubisoft to show accountability and support was seen by the union as completely empty with no meaningful solutions, no concrete assistance, and no tangible commitments to help the people who were affected by this decision. The closure of the Halifax studio was already a heavy blow on its own, especially in a part of the industry where jobs are not always easy to replace locally and where moving to another city or even another country is often the only way to stay employed in game development. That creates an enormous financial and emotional burden to workers and their families. So when the union went into that meeting, they weren't looking for vague sympathy or polished corporate language. They were hoping for things that actually matter, like strong severance packages, relocation assistance, job placement programs, healthcare considerations, extended benefits, transparency about why the closure happened, and sense that Ubisoft recognized its responsibility to the workers who helped build its brand and its games. Instead, according to the union, what they got was a conversation that lacked substance, a meeting that produced no real offers, no actionable plans, and no meaningful proposals. That's why the phrase, it had nothing to offer, is so powerful because it cuts straight through the PR language and exposes how hollow the interaction felt to the people who needed support the most. Dialogue without action is meaningless when people are facing unemployment, lost benefits, and uncertain futures. This is part of a much larger problem in the gaming industry where studios are open and closed based on shifting market strategies, corporate restructuring, and financial forecasting, where the workers inside those studios are expected to instantly adapt to life changing decisions they had no control over. We see it happen again and again. Executives talk about difficult choices and restructuring for the future, while developers are left scrambling to find new jobs, sell their homes, move their families, or even leave the industry entirely. What makes Halifax different is the presence of a union that can speak collectively and publicly about how unacceptable this is. When a union says that a company came to the table with nothing to offer, it's not just disappointment. It's a direct challenge to the idea that companies can close studios without taking real responsibility for the fallout. It forces the conversation away from corporate messaging and toward worker dignity, accountability, and long term industry sustainability. Ubisoft is a massive publisher with global reach and enormous resources, which is why the situation hits even harder. When a company of that size cannot immediately present meaningful support options, it sends a message that workers are viewed as disposable once they no longer fit the current business model. And that message resonates far beyond Halifax because developers everywhere are watching and seeing how one of the biggest names in gaming handles the human cost of its decisions. The moment also exposes the growing divide between how companies talk about games and how workers experience the industry. Publishers love to talk about creativity, passion, innovation, and community. But when a studio closes, the conversation suddenly becomes distant, corporate, and transactional. That disconnect is exactly what fuels unionization efforts in the first place because workers want protection, stability, and a real voice when major decisions are made that affect their lives. The union's response makes it clear that simply showing up to a meeting is not enough. Companies have to come prepared with real offers, real assistance, and real accountability. This isn't about demanding perfection, it's about demanding effort and sincerity. When a studio closes, the damage isn't theoretical, it's immediate and personal, and the idea that the first conversation had nothing to offer feels like a complete failure of corporate responsibility. Situations like this also highlight why the gaming industry has such a burnout problem. It's not just the long hours or crunch culture, it's the knowledge that no matter how much passion you put into your work, no matter how successful your projects are, you can still be discarded without a safety net. The fear hangs over developers constantly and shapes how they view their careers and their futures. The Halifax situation should be a wake up call, not just for Ubisoft, but for the entire industry. If publishers want loyalty, creativity, and long term commitment from their workers, then they must be willing to show loyalty and commitment in return when times are difficult. That means coming to the table with real support instead of empty discussions. This story matters because it's not isolated. It's part of a larger pattern that continues to define modern game development. The more it happens, the more people will push for stronger protections, stronger unions, and stronger standards for how workers are treated during layoffs and closures. If a company truly values the people who make its games, then the moment a studio shuts down should be the moment it steps up the most, not the moment it quietly pulls away. The fact that the Halifax Union felt Ubisoft had nothing to offer shows just how large the gap still is between what workers need and what publishers are willing to provide. If you found this video insightful or important, make sure to give it a thumbs up because it really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more coverage on the business side of gaming and the real people behind the games we love. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads, especially as stories like this continue to shape the industry in major ways. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon, where the latest Patreon exclusive takes a deep look at licensed games that were actually good. Not every licensed title was a cash grab, and it's a fun, nostalgic deep dive you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, thanks for supporting the channel, and as always, game on.